Hello, my name is Reverend Jeff Rock, and I'm the senior pastor of the Metropolitan Community Church of Toronto, a vibrant and inclusive and progressive faith community and human rights center in the city's East End. So I have this daily ritual. Every single morning, 365 days a year, I do the exact same thing when I wake up. I stumble my way to the kitchen, I put the kettle on to boil and fresh grind my coffee beans to prepare to brew some coffee in my French press. Now, in pre-COVID times, I would then go and get ready while the coffee steeped, poured into my travel mug for my commute to work and be on my way. But these days, my commute is simply to the kitchen table where my computer sits. And so now, I sit here every morning with my coffee, and while I do, I take this little blue pill. It's known as Truvada. It's an HIV medication made up of entrectinib and tenofovir. Now, some of us take that little blue pill as part of our antiretroviral regimen that helps us keep our viral load at bay so that we can continue to live healthy and long lives. Others of us take that little blue pill as PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, a medication that effectively blocks you from contracting HIV and AIDS. Either way, it's part of my daily self-care routine, this little ritual of coffee and a little blue pill. And many of us will have similar rituals, whether we take Biktarvy or Dovato, or if we're trans, we might be on HRT as estrogen and testosterone, or maybe you even take multivitamins or blood pressure pills or insulin. When we take our medication, it is part of a self-care ritual that is beautiful. Now, for me as a pastor in the Christian tradition, it's also reminiscent of communion, which is a sacrament, a simple and yet symbolic meal of togetherness when Christians have a little bit of bread or a wafer and some juice or wine. Taking my pills every morning with my coffee is a sacrament. It's a sacrament of my sexuality. It is a sacrament of self-care and self-love that connects me in solidarity with all those who are dealing with this disease. Because no matter your backgrounds or beliefs, I think we all need rituals right now, rituals of self-care in these tough COVID times, but also rituals like this AIDS vigil that connects us to each other thanks to the power of technology. Now, religions around the world each have their own rituals. There are Buddhist prayer wheels and prayer flags. There's indigenous sweat lodges. There's Muslim daily prayers. And in the Jewish tradition, there's bar and bat mitzvahs. But in traditions around the world, there's a tradition of lighting candles as we remember. Rituals that help us mark the good times and the bad times and remind us that we are not alone, and they connect us to people past, present, and future, and remind us that we are also part of something bigger than ourselves. So we've got rituals for the birth of a baby, coming of age rituals, rituals of marriage, but also rituals of death. In the queer community, there's rituals like drag shows and brunch. Even going to the gym is a daily ritual that I know many of us are looking forward to returning to. And lots of our rituals have been disrupted in this last year. Our holiday rituals, our pride rituals. But now more than ever, in these COVID times, we need our rituals. Not necessarily religious ones either, right? And I hope you found rituals and routines to get you through these tough months, and maybe even created some new traditions. But this AIDS vigil is an important annual ritual because it makes us connected to each other across time and space. And I'm so grateful for the organizers for putting this event online, because this vigil is an occasion to acknowledge those that we have loved and lost, to say their names and inscribe them on our hearts and inscribe them on the AIDS Memorial at Barber Hall Park, to take a moment to pause and reflect. But this AIDS vigil is also about remembering how far we've come in medical research and in global action and as a community, remembering those who aren't just surviving with HIV, but thriving. This vigil is an occasion to remember how the HIV/AIDS epidemic brought us together as a community, remembering the queer women that cared for their gay brethren, remembering the activists who acted up, remembering the drag queens who spoke out, the indigenous leaders who called us to ceremony, and the Black leaders who reminded us we must be intersectional. those living with HIV who said, "Not about us, without us." Recognizing that HIV still disproportionately affects men who have sex with men, indigenous communities, racialized communities, that the burden of HIV is still held in the global south, that harm reduction is needed to address HIV in users. And so this ritual, this vigil, is a commitment to continue to fight injustice anew, both globally and locally. And this little sacrament of self-care, of one single pill and a cup of coffee, is also a ritual of self-empowerment and self-care as an individual. And both this sacrament and this ritual connect us all to people past, present, and future, working to end this disease as we dream of a world with 0 new cases, 0 stigma, and 0 AIDS-related deaths. Because this illness, this disease isn't over yet. This past year I've done several HIV-related funerals here in Toronto. But also I recognize that there is a new generation of sexually liberated youth who need to be educated about this little blue pill and about HIV and AIDS. There's folks being diagnosed today who need emotional support in our communities. And there's newfound knowledge that undetectable equals untransmittable, and stigma is the real problem. There's a desperate need to get antiretrovirals to the global south. There are elders living with this disease who need connection and whose stories of the early days of the epidemic need remembering. So my hope and my prayer this day is that today's AIDS Vigil will be a remembering of those we have loved and lost, and a heartbreaking past, but also a call to action to create a more hopeful future. So get tested, get treated, fight stigma, and fight racism and homophobia and biphobia and transphobia. Call politicians to action. Call them literally. Fight for harm reduction. And together we can end HIV and AIDS in our lifetime.